Fascist thugs hiding behind black masks, vile neo-Nazi group. They've posted a photo giving the fascist salute in front of the Adelaide Holocaust Museum. It's just despicable, and imagine being filled with that much hatred running through your veins. What a sad and sorry bunch. Dr. Dvir Abramovich is the chair of the Anti-Defamation Commission, and he joins us now. Doctor, thank you very much for your time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and good to be back with you.
This is just unthinkable, and yet here we are in our own backyard. It's happening.
Well, I've been raising the alarm and sounding the bells for many years now about these card-carrying neo-Nazis. And this really was a declaration of war against the Jewish community and against the South Australian people. It also, I think, plunges a dagger into the heart of every Holocaust survivor. It spits on the memory of the 6 million Jews and millions of others that were murdered by the Third Reich, and it tears to shreds the proud legacy of the diggers who sacrificed their lives to defeat Hitler's regime. It's a very, very sad day, but it's also a timely wake-up call that domestic extremism is on the rise and that white supremacism is not history, it's current affairs.
When you saw it, can I ask you how it made you feel? What emotions it evoked?
It was like being kicked in the stomach, and it reinforced for me that we are seeing a new willingness by these hardcore racists to put themselves front and center on the Australian public stage. And let's remember one thing, you only need a lone individual listening to the propaganda and the toxic ideology that these bigots are peddling to become convinced that it's a cause worth fighting for. And we had Brenton Tarrant in Christchurch, but we also had, nearly 26 years ago, Timothy McVeigh, who blew up a building in Oklahoma. We've had many examples of lone wolf, homegrown domestic terrorists in waiting who have committed atrocities. So the worst thing that we can do is to underplay the threat that these individuals pose.
I think it's really scary to think that there is this active group walking around in our society right here in Adelaide. I think a lot of us that would have seen that today would be in disbelief. I mean, is it a South Australian problem, or is it an Australian-wide problem?
No, it's a nationwide problem. And, who would have thought that in 2022 the modern face of Hitler would reveal itself in Adelaide, but without consequence. And we are seeing neo-Nazi ideologies, rallies, alive and well across the country. And these ticking time bombs, who are a clear and present danger, are agitating for a racial war. And I know that they are recruiting like-minded individuals, disaffected young men and women. And the bottom line is this: we can't ignore this form of extremism, because putting on the blinders will cost lives. We know that there is a direct linkage between hateful words, conspiratorial ideas that they are pushing, and lone wolf shooting incidents. So usually where we have white supremacists come together, physical assaults and murder are usually not far behind.
Well, I was just going to ask that. You've been observing this behaviour for many, many years and campaigning against it, observing behaviours. When it starts like this, last time we spoke it was about stickers. Here we are today with this image. I mean, is there something that's common that comes next, or do we not know?
Well, make no mistake, the dangerous rhetoric that these Hitler worshippers are spewing often can cross the line into real-world lethal attacks, especially because such groups glorify and are inspired by so-called heroes or martyrs who have carried out massacres. Brenton Tarrant, for example, was almost recruited by the NSN, this particular group that gave the Heil Hitler salute outside the Holocaust Museum. And we also know that Brenton Tarrant self-radicalized online. So as I keep saying, we do not need to wait for an atrocity in the heart of Adelaide to understand that this is a whole-of-society challenge, that we have to confront this problem and tear it at its root, because ignoring it will cost lives.
Would their parents or wives or girlfriends, best mates, know that they're doing this?
Good question. I mean, they often do those things in the dark, so to speak, but they are becoming much more emboldened and agitated. It would be impossible for them to hide their activities. And look, the point is this. These violent, hateful ideologies that they are promoting, they are proud of doing this. They see themselves as, the next generation of the modern-day guards of Auschwitz. They dream about an area in Australia whereby they can push people like myself into the gas chambers. And we have to remember that modern white supremacist cause is based on the idea that the white race is under extinction, is under threat by an alleged rising tide of people of color. And we know that online propaganda can feed acts of violent terrorism. And let's not forget, these acts can be considered to be terrorism. And what they did this week outside the Holocaust Museum was intended to sow fear and to intimidate.
How should they be treated?
Well, I've been arguing and screaming from the rooftop for years now that the federal government needs to designate these movements as terrorist organizations, because then it would give law enforcement all the resources and tools that they need to actually tackle this problem head on. It would mean that they can't communicate, their assets can be frozen, and there are much more severe punishment for them violating those rules. I think the second thing, and I think we spoke about it last time, it's really time for the South Australian government to get its act together, to take the high moral ground, and to honor the sacred values and our common humanity, and to ban the public displays of the Nazi swastika. It's not a magic bullet. It's not a shortcut. It's not a formula that will immediately eradicate the problem of neo-Nazism. But it will send a very clear message to the community that neo-Nazism will never find a safe haven in South Australia, and that the law is not on their side. It's really time, and I'm willing to fly up to South Australia and to shake the hand of the Premier and anybody who will vote for that particular law.
Do you fear that something really bad will happen before the government does act and take it seriously? Do part of you feel like, that's just a group and, they're just posting photos, we'll deal with that, but maybe the understanding of just what they're capable of isn't understood?
Look, the risk here is that there may be people out there that, South Australia Police or counterterrorism or ASIO are not aware of. And the danger here is that they would be listening to all the dangerous ideology, and it's feeding and amplifying their fantasies about an area in Australia. And the danger is that they will think that they need to take action, and that action could mean going into a shopping center or into a synagogue and murdering people, as we saw Robert Bowers do in the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue and in other places. So I'm never ruling out the possibility that this rhetoric will turn into deadly and lethal attack.
There's been an alarming number of far-right extremist meetings, gatherings in Australia in recent times. Do they want attention? Is talking about it like we are feeding it?
No, it's not. What we ignore, we empower. And this is one of those issues that we need to have a discussion in the public square. I think we have to educate the public. I think your listeners need to be aware of this evolving threat that we are facing. And let's remember that they will continue doing what they're doing, regardless of media coverage. What is feeding them is this fantasy about an Australian Hitler at the helm. What's feeding them is killing as many Jews and minorities as possible. It's not the media which is prompting them to do those things. It's this violent ideology. And let's remember, Hitler was an anti-Semite before he became a final solutionist and decided to construct all those gas chambers and to execute families in open fields. This is not something that we can turn away from. And as I've said before, this is a problem from hell that we can't hide or run away from.
Who are they targeting? When they're in recruiting, who are they targeting?
They usually are targeting disaffected, isolated, lonely white men. We saw them over the last 3 years exploit COVID-19 in insert themselves into the conversation about anti-lockdown and anti-vax campaigns. And what they were doing was to look for scapegoats. So they were promoting, the old anti-Semitic blood libel that it was Jews who were responsible for this health and economic crisis. They were participating in anti-lockdown demonstrations. They are looking for an audience, and both virtual and real. And we shouldn't assume that they're not tech-savvy or they don't understand how promoting their cause works. They're very smart when it comes to those issues. And again, this is really a fight between good and evil, and it's one that I'm determined to win. We have to win it, but I think it's also a psychological one, is that the community needs to harness the energies and the goodwill that we have to tell our politicians, to tell our elected representatives that this is a threat that needs to be taken seriously.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time today.
Appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
Yeah, you too, Doctor. Dr. Dvir Abramovich there, Chair of the Anti-Defamation Commission.